I just got off a call today with one of my favorite clients, Jana. Jana, if you're listening, I'm trying to get her to come on the podcast, actually. And we had an interesting conversation. We just kind of wrapped an interview and we got into a conversation about what level of person is her business ready for. And she's kind of touching on $40 million in sales and getting ready to go beyond. And she was talking about hiring someone at the executive level. And I was kind of walking her through and asking questions around, is the business ready for that? So that's what I want to talk to you about today. No guests, you're stuck with me. But today we're going to talk about, when is your business ready to bring in that high-powered executive, or what should you be looking for when you bring in that high-powered executive? And I hope to give you a couple case studies around that as well.
Welcome to the KeyHire Small Business Podcast, hosted by Corey Harlock, creator of KeyHire Solutions, where small business owners learn how to build stronger teams, simplify growth, and scale confidently. Got feedback or topic ideas? Send us a text. If you're listening on a handheld device, tap the link in the show notes to message the show. Subscribe or follow on your favorite platform, and follow KeyHire Solutions on social media for more insights and updates between episodes. To learn more about how KeyHire can help scale your business, visit keyhire.solutions. Connect with Corey on LinkedIn through the link in the show notes. Mention you're a listener, and he'll accept your request. And now, on with the show. Here's your host, Corey Harlock.
All right, welcome back to the show. I'm Corey, and I'm going to be your host here today. Some housekeeping before we get into the show. We did have a comment on one of our previous shows. Purnima said she loved the conversation and thought we have an awesome podcast. And that was from our episode on the 3 numbers every business owner needs to know that we did a few weeks ago. Also, last episode was our 100th episode, which is amazing. We had Shannon Minifie on. We're getting great response to that podcast. She was great, fellow Canadian from my old stomping grounds. So if you haven't listened to her about the how to tame the advice monster, I recommend you go back and do that. Also, we got this in the mail. It is the Best of Small Business Awards, Best Business Consultant. Again, thank you to everyone who helped us and took time out of their day to go through the rigmarole of voting to help us win. We couldn't be more grateful for your efforts. So thank you again. And it looks amazing up on my award shelf with the other awards we've won for the podcast. Okay, enough bragging. Let's get into the show. I have worked, what we do, the work we do with small business owners is advising them on talent. We are their human capital, insourced human capital experts. And our job is to help them, first kind of analyze the business and say, here's where we are today. Here's when say you're $10 million today, your goals get to 50. Here's what your organization looks like today. And here's what it's going to need to look like at 50. And that is not a straight line, right? Your organization is going to change. There's going to be lots of different iterations within the organization. The second thing we do is then a roadmap for you. So here's what we need to do. Here are the people we're going to need to plug in. And here is the sequencing of how we need to plug these people in based on your specific business. It's not the same for every business, and I'll maybe talk a bit about that as we go through. And then the third thing we do is the actual acquisition. So developing those job profiles. If we're going to bring in a new, maybe you have a production manager and we think we need to bring in at a director level to bring in some capacity and experience, we'll help build out that job profile. How do they integrate into the business? What does that new accountability or org chart look like? And then we'll acquire that talent and help plug them in and get them ready to go based on the demands of the business. So that's kind of the foundation of this conversation. So when I was speaking with my client here today, she was saying, I really think I need someone at the executive level and for a specific role. And I thought, that's an interesting thought, why? And she was like, I just spoke with some people, and the language they used, the language they were speaking really resonated with her. And that makes a ton of sense. And my concern always is when you start going out to bring in executive level people with a growing and scaling company, and if you don't have the right infrastructure, if we bring in that executive level, they're used to being very strategic, forward looking. The problems generally come to them, and they analyze and use their experience and capacity to solve that problem and kind of push it back to the people and say, here's how we can deal with these things. And if you don't have the infrastructure underneath of them to deliver on their thoughts and ideas, what you can often get is some amazing strategy, amazing vision, really good stuff that you get really excited about, but it doesn't get executed on. Or if it does get executed on, it's not to the level that was outlined because the support systems aren't below them. And let me just kind of walk you through a couple of examples that I've seen and experienced this happen with. When I started recruiting, way back in Canada years ago, before KeyHire was even a thought in my brain, I was new to recruiting, and one of the partners at the firm I was working with, Bob, he told me a story about they hired an executive from a big oil and gas company, and he was well connected. He knew people. I think he got packaged out. He was had a couple of years left before he retired. He wanted to try his hand at recruiting. And Bob said every time he'd walk by his office, he would just be sitting at his desk staring at his computer. So he went in and said, hey man, what's going on? And he said, well, I've answered all my emails. I've sent everything out I need to send. I'm just waiting for the phone to ring, I guess. And that in a nutshell is what can happen. He was used at his executive level to being in his office and having everything come to him. He wasn't used to picking up the phone and trying to drum up business. He didn't have to pick up the phone to call to the people he managed to see what was going on. They were coming to him. And Bob referred to him as an inbox manager. At that level, at that executive level, often all you're doing is managing your inbox. Like I said before, everything comes to you because everything runs through you. It comes up to you, you solve the problem, you make the adjustments, and it flows back down. That's the span of control. That's the way the communication rolls. And so when you take someone out of that environment and put them in an environment where they have to go out, find the problems, or they have to have the idea and then roll up their sleeves and execute on that problem, it can be a challenge. Another example of this is I worked with CNC shop, and the owner called me and said, we need to hire a general manager. And I thought, okay, great. So we went in and did our diligence. We did our analysis. And what we saw in the business was, after talking to people, that they had no problem with sales. Sales were coming in. Sales was not their issue. But their operation was, they were, for argument's sake, let's say they were doing $20 million in revenue. Well, they were running on a $10 million system. They were stressed. There were cracks. You're wheeling around out there in forklifts. And if things go wrong and you push that, they were at the point where if they pushed it too far, too much, too hard, something was going to go wrong, whether in the operation or a safety incident or something. That was my concern. And so in talking to him, he said, we hired this guy. We got to get this right, because the last guy I hired, we hired him, and after 2 months, no one even knew what he did. But after digging into that situation about the person he'd hired previously, that he said all the right things. He had great strategy. He was more on the sales side than on the operation. And he had all these ideas and things that he had done and wanted to do and thought they should do, but they did not have the infrastructure underneath him to execute on it. And if I remember correctly, his comment was, after 2 months, no one knew what he was really even doing anymore, because he was just waiting. I have all these ideas. Where are the people coming to me that I can give them to go execute on that? And I can manage those people and the job they're doing. The general manager role that he thought he needed, he wanted to bring in another big ticket item, but after doing the analysis, so this could have gone wrong twice, and then he really would have said, we've spent money on these big wig executives and they just don't work out. The person that after our analysis we said he really needed was a director of operations, because I explained to him, I said, your sales are fine. And if you focus on sales, you're going to stress your operation to the point where you're going to have something happen that's bad for people or bad for the business, but we just don't want that. We need to level up your operation. And, business grows. It doesn't grow like this. Sales and operations don't grow at the same pace. Operations outpaces sales. So then you beef up your sales, it outgrows, then you got to beef up your operations. And it's kind of this teeter-totter way that your business will grow within your staffing and departments. So what I told him was, if you go out and get a general manager and they are a sales background, when it gets busy or when they want to have impact, they're going to go work with your sales team, not your operations team. So even if they spend 60% of their time with sales and 40% with operations, they don't have the operational know-how, knowledge, capacity to impact your operation in a meaningful enough way that it's going to level up to catch up with sales. What he's going to do is increase sales, and he's going to make your problem worse, and he's going to drive it to a conclusion that may not be good for your business. So what you need is a director of operations before we do anything here. And which is what we did. We brought in a director of operations. Actually, we ended up doing an internal promotion, and the individual in a really short amount of time was able to do some really great things with the operation and get it into an area where it was safe. They were having stand-up meetings. They were doing things they never did. He leaned it out, drew his lines on the floor, had his lanes, moved shipping, moved receiving, made sure the flow was safe and accurate and efficient. So that's another case study where if you just think you need something and don't do the analysis and bring in that high horsepower executive, hoping and thinking they're going to make a big impact in your business, but we don't understand where we need that impact or go after the right person, it could be a mistake. I'll give you one more case study, and then we'll talk about kind of the mistakes you might make and how to overcome those. Another client I had, we brought in at different times 2 very high horsepowered individuals. We brought in one for operations, and we called him a VP of operations. And because he had that entrepreneurial spirit, and that's what we're looking for. We want that executive with horsepower and capacity and experience, but we also need them to have an entrepreneurial spirit. We can't have them born and raised in corporate world, in these large corporations, and bring them to our small operation where it's all hands on deck and you got to wear a different hat every day or 3 or 4 hats per day. When they come from corporate only, they're very siloed in the way they think, and they're very accustomed to having, well, that's not my job. That's another department. That's what we don't want. So the one where we were successful, we brought in a VP of operations who had worked for smaller companies. And he was with the company for about 2 years. And he had an immense impact on that business. He brought them so much value in terms of lean management, training people on lean, but also training them and cross-training them and developing his leadership team. In fact, he had developed the operations manager to the point when he left, that individual was promoted to director of operations, and the operation never missed a beat. So he was very valuable because he was suited perfectly for that role. That company was ready. We had the infrastructure for him, but we also got the right person who, yes, was a corporate individual, but they had an entrepreneurial background and they had worked in small business, and they had what we look for, which we call the entrepreneurial spirit, the understanding that I just don't get to sit at my desk all day. The problems aren't going to come to me all day, and I can't just, analyze, recommend, hand it back and say, okay, now go fix this. I don't have the layers or the experienced team that this will just go get dealt with. I'm going to have to walk out on the floor and stand beside someone and get my hands dirty solving this problem, but also understand that's going to be a teaching moment so I can develop and make my people better. So that was a win. That was a good one. The other one in the same company, it was a director of sales who we brought from a large company, and what we needed was a working sales director, someone who was going to be working with the salespeople and helping close deals and be out on the road. And the individual was, again, an inbox manager. They were used to sitting in their office, having their salespeople come to them, making their recommendations and pushing them out, and reading reports and analyzing how people are doing and what we need to do and coming up with a strategic vision. That was a miss. We missed that one. So out of those three scenarios, I'm 2 for 3. I made one right recommendation, walking them off the ledge. I made one right hire, and then one was a miss. But we learned from that. That was a long time ago, 7-8 years ago, and we've gotten much more accurate at what we do. So if you are a small business owner and you're thinking, man, I really need to get this executive level person in here to help me, let's talk about the mistakes you might make as you kind of walk through what we do. I always talk about the 3 big mistakes small business owners make when they do DIY hiring. Number 1, we don't clearly define the role. Number 2, we hire for today's revenue and not tomorrow's revenue, future revenue. And number 3, we don't have the right hiring process that is exhaustive and efficient in place. We don't have the right people lined up to run them through the process. We don't have the same people asking the same questions in the same order. And we kind of make an ad hoc process and hope that's going to work. So if we're going after a big ticket, high horsepower executive, we definitely need to understand what we're looking for. So you need to dig in. The mistake you can make here is just saying, we need a general manager. We need a VP of sales. We need a VP of operations. We need whatever it is, without really looking at the deliverables and what's missing. It could be what you really need is a fractional person, and you need to hire a really strong number 2 who's going to get their hands dirty and do the work. Or it could be you might need another role altogether, but you've not thought about it. You haven't. You're missing what the real constraint, the real problem is, and you might be associating it with one department, but it could be somewhere else. Just like going back to the general manager, we need a general manager to oversee everything. The problem is we need someone to organize this. That wasn't the problem. The problem was operationally, we were hitting that red line, right? We were revving that engine to the point where we were redlining, and we were going to run into some trouble. So don't make the mistake of just jumping to a quick conclusion. Do the diligence of diving in and finding that constraint, or go out and get a third party, someone like me, to come in and do the diligence for you and talk to your folks, for someone who's unbiased, who's just going to look at your operation as it is and say, okay, we think we found the constraint that we're trying to solve for. Just hiring someone with a general background in what you're doing might not be the right thing to do, especially if you're going to pay high dollar value to bring them in. Now, I don't want you to make a $200,000 or $250,000 mistake bringing someone in who says, oh yeah, we can do this, we can do that. But then when you get them in there, they don't know what they're supposed to do. Or perhaps what else can happen is you hire someone on a full-time basis for high dollar, big ticket item to solve a problem that takes them about 30 or 60 days to fix. And now they're misguided, right? There's no North Star for them to be working towards. They've solved the problem. They don't know what to do. You wonder, what are they doing? And they don't have the skills, experience, capacity, whatever you want to call it, to kind of go out and find new challenges and keep fixing it, because we may have pigeonholed them with a title and said, you are in charge of this part of the business. Well, they fix one thing, the project that you brought them in to do initially, and then there's nothing else for them to do in that department that is worth that type of money, right? So I've seen my business owners who've done this, and then they call KeyHire to say, hey, we think we might have done something here, or we need to bring someone in, but we're not sure what it is. But we did have someone here and they were great for a month or two. And then the last 4 months, no one knew what they were doing. And so we had to let them go, or they came to us and said, yeah, I don't know why I'm here anymore. So maybe it's time for me to move on. So clearly define the role. That's always important. The other mistake you might make is jumping to that quick conclusion about why we're bringing them in and what we're going to pay them. Arbitrary numbers are always great. And what falls into this category as well is someone who is out of work, who you have dinner with or go for a drink with, or you run into them on the street, they're your neighbor, and they happen to be, I just got laid off, and what were you doing? I was in this, geez, we could use your talent here. So we don't run them through the right hiring process to clearly vet them to make sure they fit the needs of our business, like we've outlined in step number 1. So the process gets short-circuited because we know them, there's some familiarity with them, we like them, they had success at their other job, but we don't go through and check, do you have the skills, experience, capacity we're looking for to grow our business and fix the problems of our business? They may have been a VP of sales in an adjacent business, and you think, oh man, that's great, let's bring them in. And they get into your company, they don't understand your product as well as you thought they did. And they're also, again, used to having a team, because we didn't have the right process where we're asking them, are you willing to travel? Are you willing to get in the car and go call on clients? Walk us through that process. If you're working for a big corporate, often the clients are calling you. And sales is really an inbound exercise. And when you're a small, independent, small business, sales is very much an outbound exercise. We don't have the luxury of people calling us because we have the product they need, or we're an OEM and they need our parts, or they're building a pipeline and we've built all the infrastructure and the part they need, they can only get from us. We don't have that luxury. But that's, I crushed my budget by 20% last year. Well, that's because maybe they had an extra project come online, and people were calling them and asking them to supply them things, and they were just invoicing. That happens. Doesn't often happen with a small business owner. So when we don't have the right process laid out, we're not asking the right questions, there's a familiarity there, we make some assumptions, they say things that sound great, like I said earlier, they're going to tell you about a strategy and an idea that sounds amazing, but do you have the infrastructure underneath them to execute on that? And are they willing to roll up their sleeves and execute on that? So those would be the two biggest mistakes that I would want to kind of highlight and address. is having the role clearly flushed out, so it's a long-term role, and then making sure we have the right process. We're asking the right questions, even if there's a level of familiarity or not. We want to make sure we're always asking the right questions and taking everyone through the same process. So when we sit down to debrief and we have the same people asking the same questions in the same order, and that group of people sits down to compare one or two or three people you've talked to, we are getting a good, honest apples to apples comparison. We've set a nice baseline. We know what we're looking for. That's a problem you fall into is you can have a really nice structured process, but you could be subbing people in and out. What I mean by that is you could interview two really high level folks for your business that you think are going to be amazing. But throughout the interview process, if you have four people that are going to talk to them, well, you sub two in. You take two out of, you sub two out from the first interview and bring in two new people for the second interview. So then when you sit down to debrief, we're not comparing apples to apples. They haven't, maybe didn't, well, I guarantee you, they didn't ask them the same questions. The people that were in the first interview may have different motivation than the people in the second interview. They may think their priority list might be different. You know, the first two people might have had, topic number B or letter B as their priority, and the second two people may think it's letter A that is the priority. So when you sit down to debrief, there's no baseline set, and we're talking apples to oranges, and it doesn't gel. So now you're making a decision based on information that's not aligned with the process. That's why we always want to involve the same people in the same order, asking the same questions. So when we debrief, we're going to get good, accurate feedback from a trusted group of people that were involved in that process, versus having people say, well, I didn't get that impression from them. Well, we interviewed this guy, he did this. Well, our guy didn't do that. And now it's not aligned, and you're not getting consistent feedback in the process. So notice of the three mistakes, I didn't talk about, capacity, right? Because when you're bringing in people with all this experience, you're bringing them in because they have the capacity and experience to grow your business. So if you get it right, they can put tons of process and procedure in place, training, whatever it is, to really bring your business, your people, your programs along so you can grow and scale a little more easily. In fact, oftentimes, and this is what we do, is we bring those high horsepower people into a smaller business for that exact reason. Because we know if you want to grow, and the business has kind of outgrown the capacity and ability of the people that are running it, we need to bring in some more knowledge. We need to bring in some more experience. We need to bring in those heavy hitters, those experts that can make quick assessments, find those constraints, and just give you some continuous improvement. And also, as a business owner, it frees you up to be more strategic, more forward thinking, and looking down the road when you know the day-to-day is taken care of. So here is what I would recommend you do. If you're sitting here thinking, yeah, we need a heavy hitter, I feel like the business is outgrowing my leadership team, we're starting to struggle, we're missing deadlines, we're not getting along the way we used to, I'm losing sleep, I'm spending way too much time away from my family, the people I used to rely on to get stuff done, I don't trust them as much as I used to. I think there's something going on with them, but I don't know what it is. Those are indications that you might need to bring in inject some experience and capacity in your business. So what level do we need to do that at? And that's going to depend on the infrastructure of your business. So if you are kind of a real flatline business and you have, your business owner and you are kind of fingers in all the pies, and the three main pies are administration, sales, and operations, and you have kind of capable people in each of those, people that used to really be able to run those departments, but now they're falling behind. You feel like it's not happening the way it should. Bringing in a huge high horsepower people above them, or high horsepower person above them, might not be the right answer because you don't have any layers in there to help kind of that trickle down. If you're, and this would be kind of more of the startup, what we'd call the overwhelmed business owner in our key owner stages. The overwhelmed business owner, the mindset often is, if I could just make this one great hire, my life will be easier. And we have the unfortunate job of telling them it's not a one hire. You're not looking for a home run. We're looking for 4 singles. We can bring in people, and each person we bring in will give you a little relief and a little more relief. And every hire we make, well, if we do it correctly, if our analysis is correctly and we create the right roadmap and we sequence these roles correctly, we can bring you in a person at your biggest pain point to give you back some time, let you breathe, spend some more time with family. Then we'll look at the next pain point and we'll bring that person in. So generally, if you're in that overwhelmed stage where what I just outlined, these people just aren't delivering, you're thinking, something's got to change here. If I could just hire one great person, you probably don't have the infrastructure to bring in that huge corporate executive level person yet. We need to build the infrastructure for you. We need to build that organization. We might be looking at bringing in a director level person. Or probably not a VP, probably not a C-level person. But at that point, you're probably looking maybe at a director to kind of come in over top of one of your struggling managers to help lift them up and bring them along. Then if we look at the next step after our overwhelmed business owner in the key owner stages, we would go to the unsure business owner. And this is a business owner who kind of knows there's a problem, knows I need to make changes, but is looking for some expert advice, right? A trusted advisor to say, here are your options. Here's how we can do this. But again, you're closer to the overwhelmed than you are to, the stage where you would be ready for that executive level person. So again, here we're still building infrastructure. We're not going out and making a $250,000 hire. And I know I keep using that number. That's not the number. It's just a number. But we're not there yet. We're still building the organization and the infrastructure. We're creating a layer within the business, but it's not that at that level yet. Again, we're probably still at a director level. Then when we get into what we call the next stage is our curious business owner. And that's the business owner who says, Corey in sales isn't cutting it. I know he's not the guy, but I don't know how to make the transition. What are my options? The curious business owner is looking for options. So that's where we could come in and say, here's what we could do. Here's some things. But are we ready now to bring in an executive C-level person if we're going to replace a director of sales? Probably not. Maybe a vice president or a VP level, maybe. And that would be getting into that big ticket, high horsepower individual. I think in the key owner stage, curious, that would be on a case-by-case basis. We would need to look at it and say, what is your current infrastructure? Can we support that person? And then the next stage would be the growing business owner. And these are the people that they need this level. These are the people that are like, okay, we're going down the road, and we literally need more horsepower. I know I keep using that word, but this is where when you're growing, it's like we have the layers, we have the team, we have our department managers, and our fear is we're on a rocket ship and I don't want to have to stop because I run out of capacity, I run out of experience. One of my managers or leaders in the business hits the wall. So this is now where you would really start looking at, okay, we need to bring in some real experts with lots of runway. They're bringing a ton of capacity. and they can look at these departments and put plans in place to say, okay, well, we're at $40 million today, but we want to get to 100. Here's what we need to do with our department. I got my manager, so now I can move my troops around. People are going to start coming to me in my office saying, hey, we just had a call from this company. Here's what they want to do. What do you think? Okay, well, let's sit down and work this out. Okay, do you need me to get on the call with you? Do you think you can handle it? Here's our strategy. We need to make some hires. I think we need to open up this region. I think we need to create a line of items that we can sell to this market. Now we're getting very strategic, and this is where you'd be bringing in that definitely a VP level person, potentially a C-level person. But now we're definitely looking at VP. When you're growing and all your aces are in places, you feel really good about your team, but you're looking down the road and you're saying, okay, I don't need any surprises. I want to make sure we have all the knowledge and know-how in the building to keep this train rolling. And then the final stage is what we call the strategic business owner. And that's the business owner. They know exactly what they want. They're like, just get me bodies. We have all of our executives in a row where we need them. We might roll out a manager here. We might roll out a supervisor. We might roll out whoever, some skilled labor, and we just need to backfill those roles to keep this thing on the tracks, because we have charted our course and we're having a great deal of success. I hope that helps understand that sometimes when we are being profitable and we get to a point where like, I just needed this experience in here, I just need someone else to deal with this. It's layered. And depending on where you are in your journey, that's going to change who you need to bring in, when, how, that price point, what you need in the business. It's all unique to you. It is all custom made. But you need to look at your business and say, where are the constraints? What does my org chart look like? How much structure do I have? What am I looking to put someone in place to kind of add stability to a department? Am I looking to put someone in place that has more capacity and experience than my current person? So am I looking to upgrade that role? Am I looking to add a whole new role? Do I need to develop a new role to add to my company to solve for the problems, the constraints, and the growth that I want? Or do I have the structure where I just need to be bringing in some people to manage these larger departments, cascade information up and down, be more office bound, have the problems coming to them and they can create the solutions and push them out? Or do I need someone who is going to get up out of their chair and go work shoulder to shoulder with the people in the business? I hope I haven't muddied the waters for you too much. And in my brain, that all makes perfect sense. But I understand as a business owner, when you're in it, it's very hard. It's a lot. And it's hard to see the forest through the trees sometimes when you're in it. So that's where, calling someone like KeyHire and saying, hey, can we go for lunch? I just need to pick your brain. We are a help first company. And we'll always take that call to help you out and kind of give you some guidance. All right, there it is. So hopefully you're getting a better understanding of when you need to splash out and go get that big ticket executive for your business. I'd like to thank you for listening. I'm Corey Harlock. I've been your host. And until next time, stop grinding, start growing.